In February 2022, in February 2022, the world woke up to a new reality. Russian tanks crossed into Ukraine. Missiles struck cities. And within days, the global system that had existed since the end of the Cold War began to crack. The West responded with the strongest sanctions ever imposed on a major power. Banks were frozen, assets were seized, companies fled Russia overnight. An energy war began, inflation exploded, supply chains collapsed, and alliances that once seemed permanent started to shift. But today, after years of conflict, a far more important question stands before us. What happens next? Will Russia break under pressure? Will Europe recover its strength? Will America maintain its dominance? Or has this war quietly pushed the world into an entirely new age? This is not just the story of Ukraine. This is the story of Russia versus the West and the future of global power. To understand where the world is going, we must first understand where it came from. For Russia, Ukraine is not just another country. It is history, it is culture, it is identity. For centuries, Ukraine was part of the Russian sphere. And after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Russia lost not only territory, it lost influence, prestige, and security. From Moscow's perspective, one fear dominated everything. NATO moving closer to Russian borders. Each new NATO expansion felt like a tightening close. For the West, however, Ukraine symbolized something else entirely. A sovereign nation, a democratic choice, a test of the Western-led international order. So, when Russia invaded, the West believed it had no choice but to respond. Both sides felt threatened. Both sides believed they were defending themselves. And when everyone believes they are right, wars do not end easily. The West believed sanctions would crush Russia within months. Russia banks were cut off from SWIFT. Foreign reserves were frozen. Oil and gas were targeted. Western brands packed off and left. The assumption was simple. No economy could survive this. But the Russia didn't collapse. Instead, it adapted. First, Russia redirected its oil and gas exports to Asia, especially China and India, often at a discounted price, but in massive volumes. Second, a shadow trade network emerged. Western products flow back into Russia through countries like UAE, Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Turkey. Third, Russia pushed aggressively toward domestic production, replacing Western brands with local alternatives. The result was not economic destruction, but economic transformation. Sanctions hurt Russia deeply, but they didn't break it. If sanctions were meant to destroy Russia, the energy war ended up hurting Europe the most. Before the war, nearly 40% of Europe's natural gas came from Russia. It was cheap, reliable, and deeply integrated into European industry. When supplies were cut, energy prices exploded. Factories shut down. Households faced record bills. Inflation hit levels unseen in decades. Europe scrambled for alternatives. Liquefied gas from the United States, pipelines from Norway, supplies from Qatar, and a sudden push towards renewable energy. Within 2 years, Europe achieved something historic. It broke its dependency on Russian energy. But the cost was enormous. American LNG companies benefited massively. Middle Eastern exporters gained new influence. Renewable energy farms boomed. Meanwhile, European consumers and industries paid the price. Russia lost European influence. Europe lost cheap energy. The energy map of the world was permanently redrawn. Isolated from the West, Russia looked eastward. China quickly became Russia's largest trading partner. Cheap Russian oil flowed into China. Chinese electronics, vehicles, and machinery flowed into Russia. India emerged as a quiet but powerful player, buying discounted Russian oil, refining it, and exporting fuel back to Europe. A diplomatic and economic masterstroke. Meanwhile, ties with the Middle East strengthened. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates maintained close coordination with Russia through OPEC Plus. What emerged was clear. Russia was no longer a European power alone. It was repositioning itself as a Eurasian power, and the global balance was shifting. Russia survived, but at a cost. Sanctions hardened its economy and strengthened ties with China. But long term isolation, technological gaps, military expenses, and demographic decline remain serious threats. Europe stabilized, but weaker. Energy independence was achieved. NATO grew stronger, and renewables expanded. But industrial competitiveness suffered. The United States emerged with strategic gains. NATO expanded, American influence increased, US energy exports surged. But domestic divisions and massive spending continue to rise. China emerged as the silent winner, buying cheap energy, expanding influence, filling markets left by Western companies. And India balanced every side, secured cheap energy, avoided alliances, and strengthened its strategic autonomy. In global diplomacy, balance is power, and India mastered it. When the war eventually ends, the world will not return to what it was. We are entering a divided global system, a new Cold War, not ideological but strategic. Europe is rearming, Russia is entrenching, China is watching closely. The Arctic, cyberspace, and supply chains are becoming a new battlefields. Ukraine faces a difficult future. Reconstructions will cost hundreds of billions. Security guarantees will define its survival. And above all, the world is shifting towards multipolarity. No single superpower, multiple centers of influence, shared dominance, permanent competition. The Ukraine war didn't just redraw borders, it reworked global energy, reordered alliances, and reshaped power itself. The Western led world is no longer absolute. The Russian challenge didn't disappear, and new powers are rising in between. The future belongs not to those who dominate, but to those who balance. This is the Russia versus the West, and this is the world after Ukraine.